Today on the Best of Oklahoma Gardening, we are selecting appropriate plants for different areas of the landscape. David Hillock has evergreen shrubs for shady locations. Kim has a beautiful selection of a native grass. We have evergreen shrubs for sunny locations, plants for poorly drained soils, plants for slopes, and shrubs that grow beneath black walnut trees. Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance is provided by TLC, Oklahoma's leading garden center, Southwood Landscape and Nursery, Tulsa's source for great gardens, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing.
Today we're going to talk to you about evergreen shrubs that grow in shady conditions. Some people get a little frustrated with shady areas because it can be a little difficult to find plants that will grow there. But there actually is a wide selection, and there's even a wide selection of evergreen plants as well. The first one I wanted to point out was this Japanese Akuba here. This one is very typical of some of the cultivars, some of them referred to as gold dust plants. And this is an excellent plant for shady, even heavy shaded areas. Some of them were, some plants that we'll talk about are going to require a little bit of dappled light or semi-shade, but this one will actually grow even in heavy shaded areas. And there are many other cultivars that are now available with different patterns of white and creamy and gold patterns on them. And we have another cultivar of the Akuba here in this bed as well, and it's called Picturata. It has larger splotches of gold and cream colors on the leaves. Another plant that I really like is one of the barberries. Now, many of the barberries can be deciduous or even semi-evergreen. This one is a true evergreen plant. It's called William Penn barberry. It has nice glossy dark green leaves throughout the summer. It can actually turn a little of a purplish color in the fall during the winter months when it's a little bit cooler. And in the springtime, it's often covered with tiny bright yellow flowers. The hollies, of course, are a good old favorite and very popular still throughout the country. And there's a wide variety of cultivars that are available. Several species that are American, Japanese, and Chinese species. And within each of those species, there's literally hundreds of cultivars that are available. Some of them actually get quite large, and some of them are very compact and very small. These are also male and female plants, so the females many of them will produce colorful berries late in the year and into the winter months. Another wonderful plant that can be evergreen, sometimes semi-evergreen depending on our winters, is the abelia and the glossy abelia. This is an excellent plant. It blooms with these white or pink flowers starting in spring and will bloom pretty much sporadically throughout the whole season. And they're excellent for attracting butterflies and hummingbirds to the garden as well. Very fragrant plants. Another one we have is the Yetta hawthorn. Also, the genus is Raphiolepis. And it's one of those southern shrubs that we're kind of pushing up up into Oklahoma. Marginally hardy this far north, but we do have some here in the gardens that have actually done quite well the past several years. But it's also a nice evergreen, dark green leaf color, have spring flowers of white to pinkish in color, and then just kind of they're generally nice, compact, well-formed shrubs the rest of the growing season. This boxwood we have here in the gardens is a wonderful variegated cultivar. It's been here for many years. It's well behaved, kind of a slower grower, and has just been an awesome plant. Provides lots of color year round, even during the winter months. And of course the variegated leaves really stand out nicely in the shade. Now another plant that we have here in the shade garden is this autolichen laurel. And it's going to get only about 3 to 4 feet tall and probably a little bit wider. It'll have white panicles of white flowers on it in the springtime. May turn a little bit of reddish color in the winter, but mostly just stays a nice dark green year round. Another one is this Japanese pyrrhus. This is can also get, depending on the cultivar, can get to be a good sized shrub, 3 to 4 feet tall and wide, and it will have panicles of white spring flowers as well. And there are several different cultivars there. Some of them will have a kind of a reddish new foliage, and then it turns a nice dark green throughout the summer. And then another one that I really like, and is somewhat underutilized in this area, is the Oregon grape hollies, or the mahonias. And there are several mahonia species that are available on the market. One of the more common ones in the south is the leatherleaf mahonia. It's a much taller, very coarse textured plant. But this one is a wonderful glossy green flowering plant. This one can also get about 3 feet tall. Now this is a compactiform, so it stays lower growing. The species can actually get 6, 7, 8 feet tall, but this one stays relatively smaller, and it has kind of like holly type leaves, though and it'll bloom bright yellow flowers in the springtime, early spring, followed by clusters of blue grape-like fruits on it. There's also a wonderful creeping form, creeping mahonia. So it's low. It only gets not much more than a foot tall and spreads. And these all will turn typically a beautiful bronzy or burgundy red color as the cooler temperatures come in, and to stay nice and red throughout the winter months.
Over the past decade or so, breeders have started to look to our native grasses as sources of ornamentals. Traditionally, most of our ornamental grasses are exotic grasses, primarily from Asia. One of the unexpected introductions is the use of blue grama, or Bodilua gracilis, as an ornamental. Now, blue grama is one of the 2 primary grasses found in a shortgrass prairie alongside buffalo grass, which many of us know. And so it's been developed here into an attractive cultivar called Blond Ambition. And I want to start at the base, looking at the foliage. It has a little blue tinge, light green color, and it'll reach a height of 18 to 24 inches. And then the flower heads are set atop those, and they can reach a height of up to about 2.5 feet or so. And the flowers are incredibly unique. Most grass flowers are rather upright, but blue grama holds its seed heads at angles, giving the plant really interesting architecture when it's in bloom. The flowers will start in mid-June, and they'll start as a green, kind of a chartreuse green color, and as the seeds mature, they turn to this golden yellow color, where it gets its name, Blond Ambition. And then the seed heads will stay on the plant through fall, hang on into the winter months. And this variety is a little bit more robust than what you would see in its native cousin, and the seed heads are a bit larger. So if you go looking in a prairie right now, the shortgrass prairie, this plant is flowering, but it's going to be a bit lower. Blue grama is a sun-loving perennial. It also happens to be fairly cold tolerant. It will come back year after year for you. It performs best in a well-drained soil, but it does tolerate a wide variety of conditions. Although it's quite drought tolerant, it'll look more like an ornamental plant if it's given a little bit of irrigation. Certainly an exciting newer introduction in the world of ornamental grasses. This is Blond Ambition Blue Grama.
Today we're going to talk about evergreen shrubs for the sun. And in a previous segment we talked about shrubs for the shade. And believe it or not, many of the plants that we talked about that tolerate shady conditions can be grown in full sun as well. Some of them might need morning sun and then afternoon shade, you know, that protection from that late hot afternoon sun and the winds. But many of them are very adaptable. A couple examples would be like this yew here. This is a Japanese yew, taxus species, wonderful evergreen. It will grow in sun or shade depending on the cultivar and the growing conditions. We also have the boxwoods that will grow in full sun very well and tolerate shade quite well. With the needle evergreens, the pines are probably one of our better forms of evergreens, and most of them are trees, but this particular one here is a dwarf mugo pine, and it's very popular and easy to grow. There's again many cultivars and selections within the species, and some are very compact and very tight, and others can get quite large. Another very popular group of plants are the junipers, and you know, that one is another one where there's dozens of species, and within each of those species there are dozens, probably hundreds of cultivars and forms. So we have some low growing carpet forming types with very nice blue colored foliage to bright greens and dark green colors. We have some that do form, you know, nice mounds, also get a little bit more upright in growth habit and spread. So there's a wide variety of junipers available, and of course the junipers are very tough plants, and once they get established, they're very drought tolerant and tolerate hot, dry conditions very well. A couple of more species that I really like and excellent for hot, dry, well-drained soils, especially western Oklahoma, are the yuccas. Now this is a true yucca. This is a variegated form that's called color guard. Has very striking texture to it, as well as the nice variegations on it. You can see that there's hairs that come off of the edges of the plant. It will also send up a spike of creamy white flowers. Excellent form and good color for year-round, again all the way through the winter. This is called a red yucca, has a red flower on it. Though it's not a true yucca, it's actually Hesperaloe is the genus on this one. And there's also a yellow flowering form of it as well. So this is another excellent plant, very thin, long, evergreen leaves. Both of them provide some wonderful texture through the winter months. The last plant I wanted to highlight was the bayberry or wax myrtle. This is the northern species, Myrica pennsylvanica, and there's a closely related one, the southern wax myrtle, which is Myrica cerifera. And they're excellent plants. Of course, the southern one does a little bit better as we move further south. This one does a little bit better on the northern part of the state and further north. But it's a wonderful, again, nice evergreen shrub, broadleaf evergreen. We'll have little tiny flowers on it in the springtime, followed by some little tiny grayish black fruits. The foliage is actually quite fragrant. You crush the leaves and it has a wonderful bayberry smell to it. Evergreen plants are a real staple for the landscape because they provide that year-round interest. And as mentioned, many of them have wonderful characteristics throughout the years, like flowers, fruits, and even colorful foliage. Now, we've only talked about a few of the many selections that are available, but as you consider plants for your landscape, consider some nice evergreens as well.
We recently looked at ways to improve soil health and drainage. Additions of organic matter address many of the problems we face in soils, but sometimes we find a problem area, and this garden is a good example of that. When we take a look at the soil, the upper layers have been improved through years of organic matter additions and compost, mulch, and they're actually in fairly good shape, a nice loose loam. But when we dig farther in, we see we have these clay soils, and our clay is very compacted and it's also poorly drained, which means these soils tend to stay wet when other areas of the garden dry out. And this is a problem because roots need oxygen for the plants to grow, so a lot of plants can't tolerate that compacted wet soil. So what are we to do about this? Our options are fairly limited. We could excavate, if this were a brand new garden, we might excavate all of the soil out to a depth of 18 to 24 inches and bring in a looser soil. But in an established garden with trees and shrubs, that's really not an option. Plus, I always find it easier to work with what you have. That's true if you're working with shady conditions or wet conditions or dry conditions. So here, to work in a wet site, we can do a couple of things. One is to control the irrigation, make sure we're not overwatering. That's both here, but also in the areas that drain to this garden. So we need to control irrigation in the larger area. And most importantly is to select plant material that can tolerate these conditions. This deciduous holly, or Ilex decidua, is a good example of a tree that works well in clay soils. Other trees for these challenging sites include the red buckeye, cypresses such as the bald cypress or pond cypress, river birch, and also the black gum. Beneath the holly, we have an abelia growing. This is Ruby Anniversary. It's an Abelia grandiflora cultivar, and this plant does very well in clay soils. Other shrubs that you might consider include chokeberry, buttonbush, summersweet, and wax myrtles. Many of our ornamental grasses don't tolerate clay soils or a lot of water, but we do have a few we can work with, including this switchgrass. Some other grasses that work well in the shade would be the inland sea oats or chasmanthium. And for sunny sites, we could work with feather reed grass or prairie dropseed. And then, of course, not quite grasses, but grass-like plants, including the sedges and rushes. You can find long lists of perennial plants that will tolerate clay soils, like this ironweed here. Some other great choices include bee balm, milkweed, yarrow, and New England aster. So remember, if you have clay soils, it's better to work with those soils by selecting the appropriate plant material, in addition to doing what you can to improve drainage and organic matter.
In previous shows, we've talked about methods that can be used to manage slopes in the landscape. And today we're going to focus more on plant material. But first of all, things that you need to consider is, of course, the steepness and the size of the slope. Long, gentle slopes are easier to manage, of course, and oftentimes turf grasses work great in those situations. But when we start getting into steeper slopes, and again, depending on the size, that can be more of a challenge. And the types of plant material that you use can be very important. And some of the characteristics that we look for in plant material when we're using them on slopes are things like deep-rooted plants. And deep-rooted plants versus shallow-rooted plants are, of course, going to be more effective in help providing stabilization to the soil so it doesn't erode and slough off. The other, of course, is the canopy, or the density of the plant material covering the slope to help slow down the rainfall, help that moisture soak into the ground rather than running off. You can also use, of course, mulches in addition to plant material to accomplish that. Another thing to remember is it's generally better to have a wide variety of plant material, not only for genetic diversity but for appearances as well. You want to use woody plant material, trees and shrubs, as well as the herbaceous ground covers. In the Botanic Garden, we have this rock garden which is located on a slope, and you can see we have a wide variety of plant material in here, both herbaceous ground covers and perennials, as well as some woody shrubs to help provide that cover and protection against the erosion. A couple that I wanted to plant out here, the yuccas are great plants. They will multiply and actually provide good soil stabilization. Excellent plants, especially for central and western Oklahoma where it's hot and dry. We also have some pines, some low-growing pines. This is a mugo pine, and then some smaller, also some Chamaecyparis, which need to be somewhat protected, but probably would do better in eastern Oklahoma versus western Oklahoma. And then we also have some of these ground covers. These are some that I really like. This is a wine cup or poppy mallow. This is a native species to the prairies. that go all the way up from Oklahoma on up into Nebraska and Kansas. It has a beautiful wine-colored flower on it. It's a deep-rooted plant. It develops a carrot-like taproot system on it. But it also is a very vigorous spreader, very aggressive, I guess I could say. It reseeds itself like crazy. So as you choose your plant material, consider how fast it spreads and whether it's going to take over the rest of your plants in that area. Another ground cover right here is the one that we really like. It has that blue green foliage. This is a euphorbia, also another aggressive spreader. It reseeds and it will cover the area pretty quickly, which could be a good thing, but again, if you want to have a variety of plant material, you need to be able to control that or select something that may be not quite as aggressive. One type of plant material that works really great in slopes are those that spread by underground roots and rhizomes, or that root where the branches touch the ground. A good example of one that spreads by underground stems or suckers are the sumacs, and we have several native sumacs that grow throughout the state. Smooth sumac, aromatic sumac, as well as the staghorn sumac. This is a smooth sumac called Tiger Eye. It actually has a wonderful color to it. And as you can see, that we started with just a few plants here, and already they've started to sucker throughout the area here. These are great plants for slopes. A plant that roots where the branches touches is winter jasmine. Well, it's really important to consider carefully the plants that you choose for planting on a slope. We put together a list to help you in your selection. This list can be found on our Facebook page. Black walnuts are wonderful stately trees that grow very large, produce wonderful shade in the landscape. They're highly valued for their wood as well as the edible nuts that they produce. They grow native in eastern Oklahoma and on to the east coast. Can be found scattered throughout the central part of Oklahoma as well. They are great trees for the landscape because they provide great shade, but the problem with them is that they produce a toxin called juglone. Now this toxin is found in most parts of the plant, in the leaves and in the bark and especially in the root system. Now the leaves and the bark and other parts of the tree the juglone is really minimal, and as those parts start to break down and decay, the juglone it also breaks apart and does not affect other plants. Many plants won't grow under a walnut tree or even within 50 feet of a tree because of the substance juglone. Today we're going to focus on shrubs. Shrubs that are sensitive to the juglone include things like lilac, chokeberry, hydrangeas, and many of the rhododendrons and azaleas. So let's take a look at some of the shrubs that will grow within the root zone of our walnuts. The first one is the juniper. Juniper species are very hardy plants. They're very drought tolerant. They have we have a wide variety of types. There's low-growing spreading ground covers as well as upright shrubs. The next plant is the Japanese maple, and it actually can be a small tree, but there are also some nice dwarf varieties that are very low-growing shrubby types. We also have viburnums, lots of viburnums. Though there are a few that might be a little sensitive to the juglone, most of them will grow underneath the tree. And that's one thing I should probably mention. Most of these plants that are on the list are based on observations, and sometimes it's just based on the species. And so if you're picking a particular cultivar, you need to make sure that that one is also tolerant of the juglone. Another plant is the deodar cedar, so the cedrus types of plants, evergreens, also the pines. We have some wonderful pine trees here. They're also quite tolerant of the juglone. Another plant is the sumacs, the roost species. There are several species. They're native and found growing throughout Oklahoma, and they are also very drought tolerant and really beautiful plants. This particular one we have growing back here is called Tiger's Eye, and it has a kind of a lime green, almost chartreuse colored leaf, and it turns beautiful in the fall with reds and oranges. Nine barks, or the Physocarpus genus. There are several species within that genus, as well as cultivars. Some of them have beautiful wine red colored leaves. Beautiful white flowers and just wonderful plants, very hardy, very tough shrubs. We also have the St. John's wort, which is a low-growing shrub for the most part. There are several species of that. They have beautiful, bright yellow flowers in the summertime, and also are very hardy plants, very drought tolerant and heat tolerant. And then finally we have the Carolina sweet shrub, the Calycanthus species. It's a native shrub, does very well in semi-shade as well as full sun, and has some beautiful maroon colored flowers on them. So walnuts make excellent landscape trees, provide lots of shade, but before you start planting underneath them, you need to do a little bit of homework. There are plenty of lists available online and through your county extension offices via fact sheets, and you want to make sure that you know whether or not those plants that you want to use are sensitive or tolerant of the substance juglone.
Next week, we're getting ready for spring. Soil and water conservation specialist Jason Warren joins Kim to talk about organic material and nutrition of soil. Coordinator of the OSU Insect Adventure, Andrina Schufran, explains the use and benefits of bee boxes and how to attract native pollinators to the garden. Extension turfgrass specialist Dennis Martin has recommendations on cool season turfgrass mixes. And David Hillock has spring startup steps for irrigation systems. Join us then for more of the best TV you'll grow to love. For additional information, show notes, plant lists, recipes, and fact sheets, visit our website or contact your local Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service office. Segments from this episode, along with hundreds more from previous episodes, are available on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Oklahoma Gardening. Be sure to join our Facebook group for information on upcoming episodes and gardening events, photos, and discussions of gardening topics. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens. This outdoor television studio is made possible with the help of our generous underwriters: TLC Garden Centers, Southwood Landscape and Nursery, and the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is provided by Pond Pro Shops, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, and the Oklahoma Horticultural Society.